The earth was still warm with the heat of burning bodies when Aloan felt the first scrape of fingers against her ankle. She'd been conscious for hours, maybe days. Time had no meaning in the suffocating darkness, buried beneath corpses in what the soldiers called a mercy grave. Mercy. The word was a bitter joke. There had been no mercy when they'd torched her village. No mercy when they'd lined up survivors and cut them down like wheat. No mercy when they'd thrown her into this pit. Still breathing, her body too broken to scream. The digging continued, methodical, patient, inhuman. Aloan tried to call out, but her throat was raw from smoke and screaming and the weight of the dead pressing against her chest. She managed only a wet, rattling gasp that tasted of blood and ash. The pressure above her shifted. Bodies rolled away with horrible wet sounds. Night air touched her face for the first time in what felt like an eternity, carrying the scent of pine and snow and something else. Something ancient and cold that made her remaining survival instincts shriek warnings she was too exhausted to heed. Hands gripped her shoulders. Strong hands, impossibly gentle. Breathe, a voice commanded. Male, low, carrying an accent she didn't recognize. Slowly. Your ribs are broken, 3 of them, I think. Breathe too fast and you'll puncture a lung. Aloan's eyes fluttered open. The moon hung full and bright above the grave, and silhouetted against it was a figure that couldn't possibly be human. Too tall, too still. Eyes that caught the moonlight and reflected it back like a wolf's. What she managed. What are you? Someone who heard you breathing when you should have been dead. He lifted her with terrifying ease, cradling her against a chest that didn't rise and fall with breath. How long have you been down there? Don't know. Since the soldiers came. 2 days? 3? His arms tightened fractionally. 3 days. You've been buried for 3 days with broken ribs, a shattered leg, and half your blood soaked into the soil. Something that might have been admiration colored his voice. You shouldn't be alive. Disappointed? A laugh? Unexpected. Genuine. Impressed. Humans break so easily. You're still fighting. He carried her away from the grave, his boots silent on ground churned by violence. Aloan's vision swam in and out of focus, but she caught details. His clothes were fine, clearly expensive, though stained with grave dirt from digging. His face was sharp-featured, aristocratic, framed by dark hair that fell past his shoulders. Beautiful in the way winter was beautiful, cold, deadly, mesmerizing. The soldiers, she whispered. Are they gone? They finished their work 2 days ago and moved on. He navigated through the ruins of what had been her village, the bakery where she'd worked since she was 12, the square where children had played, the church where her mother had prayed every morning. All of it reduced to charred skeletons and silence. What's your name? Aloan. Each word cost her. Aloan Ashcroft. I'm Theron. He paused at the edge of the village, where forest met destruction. King Theron, if we're being formal, though my kingdom is somewhat diminished these days. King of what? Nothing that concerns the living. He adjusted his grip on her, and she bit back a scream as broken bones shifted. I'm taking you to my residence. It's not far. You'll be safe there. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why did you dig me out? Why do you care if one human lives or dies? Theron was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. The forest closed around them, ancient trees blocking out the moonlight, their footsteps muffled by centuries of fallen needles. Because I was walking through these woods, as I have for the past 200 years, and I heard something impossible, he said finally. A heartbeat where there should have been only silence. A will to survive that refused to break even when buried beneath the dead. And I thought. He looked down at her, his inhuman eyes unreadable. I thought perhaps someone who could endure 3 days in a mass grave might be strong enough to endure what comes next. What comes next? His smile showed teeth that were just slightly too sharp. That depends entirely on whether you want to live, Aloan Ashcroft. Because the infection in your leg will kill you by morning. The blood loss will take you even sooner. I can save you, but the price is high. What price? Everything you were. Everything you thought you'd become. Theron's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I can make you immortal. I can make you strong enough that no army, No king, no god could ever bury you alive again. But you'll never be human. Never be the girl who worked in a bakery and dreamed simple dreams. Aloan's vision was fading, darkness creeping in from the edges. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, each pulse weaker than the last. Dying would be easy. Letting go would be a mercy. But she'd spent 3 days refusing to let go. I want to live, she whispered. Then live you shall. Theron's fangs gleamed in the darkness. And when you wake, we'll discuss what you're going to do with eternity. Aloan woke to pain that rewrote her understanding of suffering. Every nerve ending burned. Her bones felt like they were breaking and reforming simultaneously. Her heart stuttered, stopped, then kicked back to life with a rhythm that was fundamentally wrong, too slow, too strong, each beat like thunder in her ears. Breathe through it. Theron's voice cut through the agony. The transformation takes differently for everyone. You're fighting it, which makes it worse. Can't stop, Aloan gasped, her body convulsing. Yes, you can. You survived 3 days in a grave. This is nothing compared to that. His hand pressed against her forehead, cool, steady. Stop fighting. Let it happen. She wanted to argue, but the pain reached a crescendo that shattered thought itself. Then, like a wave breaking, it receded. The burning faded to a dull ache, then to nothing. Aloan's eyes snapped open. The world had changed. She could see individual dust motes floating in lamplight 20 feet away. Could hear Theron's clothes rustling with movements too subtle for human perception. Could smell old blood in the stone walls around her. Centuries of it, layered like history written in copper and iron. Welcome back, Theron said, and she could hear the smile in his voice without looking at him. Aloan sat up slowly. They were in a chamber carved from living rock. Not a cave, but something deliberately constructed, with vaulted ceilings and furniture that spoke of wealth from a dozen different eras. A Renaissance painting hung beside medieval tapestries. Roman columns framed a doorway leading to darkness. Where am I? My home. Deep beneath the thornwood forest. Theron sat in a chair that might have belonged to some long-dead king, watching her with the patience of something that had all the time in the world. You've been unconscious for 2 days while the transformation completed. Faster than most, incidentally. Your body adapted remarkably well. Aloan looked down at her hands. The fingers that had kneaded bread dough and scrubbed floors were unchanged in appearance. But when she flexed them, she felt strength that hadn't existed before. The leg that had been shattered was whole. The ribs that had broken were intact. I'm a vampire, she said, testing the word. You are. One of only 17 I've turned in 200 years. Theron leaned forward, his dark eyes intent. I don't create progeny lightly, Aloan. Most humans aren't worth the effort. They break under the weight of immortality, go mad from the hunger, or become exactly the kind of monsters that justify humanity's fear of us. Why me, then? I told you. I heard you breathing in that grave. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. But it was more than that. When I pulled you out, you looked at me, dying, broken, half dead, and you asked what I was. Not begging for help, not weeping, just asking, curious even at death's door. He stood, moving to a cabinet carved from dark wood. That kind of spirit is rare, worth preserving. He poured 2 goblets of something dark and handed one to Aloan. She took it automatically, then froze as the smell hit her. Blood. Rich, warm, intoxicating. You'll need to feed soon, Theron said, returning to his chair with his own goblet. The hunger will become unbearable otherwise. This is from deer. I maintain a relationship with the forest. Take what you need, leave the creature alive. It's sustainable. Aloan stared at the goblet, her new instincts warring with her human revulsion. I can't. You can and you will. This is what you are now. His tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. You chose survival. This is what survival requires. She drank. The blood was nothing like she'd feared. Not disgusting, but vital, necessary. Filling a hollowness she hadn't known existed. When the goblet was empty, she felt more alive than she had even before the soldiers came. Tell me about yourself, Theron said. Before the massacre. Who was Aloan Ashcroft? The question caught her off guard. I was no one. A baker's apprentice. Orphaned young. Fever took my parents when I was 8. The baker, Master Cornelius, took me in, taught me the trade. She set down the goblet. I had a small room above the bakery. Friends in the village. A boy, Willem, who talked about marriage someday. It was ordinary, simple. And now? Now Willem is dead. Cornelius is dead. Everyone is dead. Her voice didn't break. She was surprised by that. The grief was there, enormous and crushing. But her new vampire nature seemed to wrap it in ice, making it bearable. Now I'm a monster who drinks blood and will live forever in the ruins of everything I lost. You're not a monster, Theron said quietly. Not yet. Not unless you choose to be. He stood, offering his hand. Come. I want to show you something. Aloan took his hand. His skin was cool, like hers now, and let him lead her through the doorway into darkness that her new eyes could penetrate perfectly. They walked through corridors lined with books, artifacts, paintings. 200 years of collected history. I was 28 when I was turned, Theron said as they walked. 1624, in Vienna. I was a minor nobleman with ambitions above my station. When a vampire offered me power and immortality, I accepted without hesitation. They entered a vast library, shelves stretching into shadow. I spent my first century as exactly the monster you fear becoming. I killed, I conquered, I built an empire of fear. I had a kingdom not metaphorical but actual. 7 cities under my control, thousands of humans and vampires alike bowing to my will. What happened? I got bored. He pulled a book from a shelf, dusty and ancient. Tyranny is remarkably tedious. The fear in people's eyes loses its thrill. The power feels hollow. So I walked away, let my kingdom crumble. Came here, to this forest, and decided to see if immortality could be something other than endless cruelty. And Aloan prompted, can it be? Theron met her eyes. I don't know yet. That's why you're here. The first week of Aloan's new existence passed in a strange mixture of wonder and horror. Theron proved to be a patient teacher, instructing her in the practicalities of vampirism, how to hunt without killing, how to mask her presence from humans, how to endure the sun's burn for brief periods should necessity demand it. His underground residence became her classroom, its labyrinthine passages revealing new chambers daily, a training hall where he taught her to move with her enhanced speed, a study where he insisted she continue her education beyond the basics she'd learned as a baker's apprentice. Intelligence matters more than strength when you have eternity, he'd said, piling books before her. I won't have you waste immortality in ignorance. On the 8th night, everything changed. Aloan was practicing her script in the study when she heard voices echoing through the stone corridors. Human voices, panicked and desperate. She found Theron at the entrance to his subterranean home. Standing before a group of refugees, 12 villagers, ragged and terrified, led by a woman with fierce eyes and a crossbow. We know what you are, the woman said, her weapon trained on Theron's chest. We know monsters live in these woods. But monsters are better than the alternative. And what alternative is that? Theron's voice was neutral, revealing nothing. The army of the radiant sun. The woman spat the name like poison. They're burning everything, villages, farms, cities. Anyone who doesn't convert to their faith immediately is executed. Anyone who hesitates is executed. We saw what they did to Thornhaven, to Ashfeld, to Millbrook. Aloan interrupted, stepping forward. The refugees flinched at her approach, sensing what she'd become. That's where I'm from. They burned it 11 days ago. The woman's eyes widened. You survived the Millbrook massacre? Barely. I was left for dead in a mass grave. Aloan looked at Theron, then back to the refugees. How many villages have they destroyed? 17 that we know of. Maybe more. A man stepped forward, cradling a child who couldn't have been more than 5. They're moving systematically, converting or killing everyone in their path. We've been running for 6 days. We're the last survivors of Ravencross. Theron's expression hadn't changed, but Aloan could sense tension in his stillness. Why come here? What do you expect from a vampire? Sanctuary, the woman said simply, or a quick death. Either is preferable to what the radiant sun does to those they catch. Her voice dropped. They don't just kill. They make examples. Public executions designed to break spirits before they break bodies. My husband. She didn't finish. Silence filled the entrance chamber. Alowan watched Theron, trying to read his ancient face. This was the choice he'd been avoiding for 200 years. Isolation or involvement, hiding or action. You can stay, he said finally. 3 days. I'll provide food, shelter, safety. After that, you move on. I'm not running a refugee camp. 3 days isn't enough. 3 days is what you get. Accept it or leave now. The woman lowered her crossbow. We accept. Thank you. As Theron led the refugees deeper into his residence, toward chambers that could house them, Alowan pulled him aside. 3 days? These people need to survive on their own. Theron cut her off. I'm not their savior. Neither are you. We give them rest, resources, and they move on. That's the bargain. The army of the Radiant Sun won't stop. You heard them, 17 villages already. How long before they reach this forest? Not my concern. Then why dig me out of that grave? Alowan's voice rose with frustration. You said you wanted to see if immortality could be something other than cruelty. Well, here's your chance. These people are running from the same soldiers who killed everyone I knew. If we do nothing because getting involved in human wars is how vampires die. Theron's eyes flashed. You think I haven't seen this before? Crusades, jihads, holy wars, they always end the same way. Vampires who involve themselves become targets. I've survived 2 centuries by staying hidden. You've survived, Alowan said quietly. But have you lived? The question hung between them like a blade. Before Theron could respond, a scream echoed from the entrance. Both vampires moved with inhuman speed, reaching the chamber in seconds. The woman with the crossbow stood over one of the refugees, a teenage boy, writhing on the ground, his skin burning with unnatural heat. He said he felt strange, the woman gasped. Then he just collapsed. Theron knelt beside the boy, his expression hardening. He pressed a hand to the boy's forehead, then jerked back as if burned. When he looked up at Alowan, she saw something she'd never seen in his ancient eyes before. Fear. Blood magic, he said. Someone marked this boy, used him as a tracking beacon. He rose swiftly. They know we're here. The army of the Radiant Sun, they're not just soldiers. They have a blood mage. How long do we have? Alowan asked. Hours. Maybe less. Theron turned to the terrified refugees. This changes everything. They'll burn this entire forest to reach us. Everyone in these chambers is now in danger because the entrance exploded inward. Stone shattered like glass, and through the dust and debris strode a figure in white and gold armor, carrying a sword that blazed with light that seared Alowan's new vampire eyes. Surrender the monsters, the armored figure commanded, his voice amplified by magic. Or burn with them. Theron's hand found Alowan's shoulder. Remember when I said getting involved in human wars is how vampires die? Yes, I'm about to break my own rule. His fangs extended. Stay behind me, and whatever happens, survive. The armored figure wasn't alone. Behind him marched 20 soldiers of the Radiant Sun, each bearing weapons etched with runes that glowed with the same searing light. And between them walked a woman in crimson robes, her hands weaving patterns in the air that made reality itself seem to ripple and bend. The blood mage. King Theron, she said, her voice carrying an accent from the southern kingdoms. The hidden sovereign. The tyrant who walked away. I've read about you in the old texts. 200 years of hiding, and a group of refugees draws you out. How disappointingly predictable. I don't believe we've been introduced, Theron said, his tone conversational despite the destruction around them. Archmagus Celestria, Chief Inquisitor of the Radiant Sun. She stepped over rubble with delicate precision. I've been hunting you specifically for 3 years. Your kind has evaded us for too long, old vampires with knowledge of blood magic, ancient power that threatens the purity of our holy mission. Your holy mission of burning villages and murdering families? Alowan couldn't stop herself. Celestria's gaze shifted to her, assessing. A fledgling. Fresh turned, unless I'm mistaken. How quaint. Her smile was cold. Tell me, little vampire, do you know what your sire did in his century of rule? The thousands he slaughtered? The kingdoms he toppled? He's not your savior. He's a monster playing at redemption. Everyone in this chamber is under my protection, Theron said, moving to position himself between Celestria and the refugees. You want me, I understand. But leave the humans out of this. The humans made their choice when they sought sanctuary with monsters. The armored commander raised his blazing sword. The law is clear. Association with vampires is heresy punishable by death. Then you'll have to kill me first. What happened next was violence compressed into seconds. Theron moved like lightning, closing the distance to the commander before the man could react. His hand caught the blazing sword mid-swing, his palm sizzling but holding firm, and he wrenched the weapon free, tossing it aside. The soldiers charged. Eloan found herself moving on instinct, her new vampire speed allowing her to intercept two soldiers heading for the refugees. She disarmed them with movements Theron had drilled into her during training, surprised by her own efficiency. But Celestria wasn't idle. She chanted in a language that predated kingdoms, and blood-red chains materialized from thin air, wrapping around Theron's limbs. He snarled, pulling against them, but they held fast, blood magic reinforced by something older, darker. Did you think I came unprepared? Celestria's hands continued their complex patterns. I've spent years studying vampire physiology, ancient binding rituals, ways to neutralize immortal flesh. You're strong, King Theron, but I have the accumulated knowledge of the Radiant Sun's 300-year war against your kind. Eloan watched Theron struggle, saw the chains cutting into his skin, saw black blood beginning to seep through. The woman with the crossbow had gathered the refugees into a defensive cluster, her weapon trained on the soldiers, though they all knew it was futile. Eloan, Theron's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with command. The North Passage. Take them and run. There's an exit that leads to the deep forest. Go. Now. I'm not leaving you. That's an order. His eyes blazed amber. You wanted involvement? You wanted to save people? Then save them. Get these refugees to safety. That's your purpose now. Celestria laughed. How touching. The tyrant has found something to care about after 2 centuries of isolation. This makes everything so much more satisfying. She tightened her fist, and the chains constricted further. Your fledgling can run. My tracking magic is already on her. Wherever she goes, we'll follow. Every person she tries to save will become bait. Every sanctuary she seeks will become a trap. The woman with the crossbow grabbed Eloan's arm. If we're bait anyway, we might as well make them work for it. Show us this passage. Eloan looked between the refugees, Theron bound in blood chains, and the Inquisitor who'd turned this encounter into an impossible choice. Every instinct screamed to stay and fight, but Theron's eyes held a desperate plea. The children first, Eloan said. Everyone else follows. Stay close and stay quiet. She led them toward the North Passage, hearing the sounds of continuing battle behind her. Theron fighting despite his bindings, buying them time with every second of resistance. The passage was narrow, carved through living rock, barely wide enough for single file. They'd made it perhaps 200 yards when Eloan heard the explosion. The entire tunnel system shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Behind them, Theron's voice rose in a roar of pain and fury that made the stone itself seem to scream in sympathy. Keep moving. Eloan pushed the refugees forward, though everything in her wanted to turn back. Through the blood bond all vampires shared with their sires, she could feel Theron weakening, could sense the magic tearing at him, could taste his determination to give them as much time as possible. The passage opened into a natural cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness, an underground river cutting through the center. The exit Theron had mentioned was visible on the far side, moonlight spilling through a gap in the rock. Cross the river, Eloan commanded. Single file, use the stepping stones. Don't fall. I don't know how deep it is. They were halfway across when Celestria's voice echoed through the cavern, amplified by magic that made it seem to come from everywhere at once. Did you really think you could escape? I've marked all of you. Your blood sings to me like a choir. A pause. But I'm feeling generous. Send out the fledgling vampire, and I'll let the humans live. Refuse, and I'll turn this entire forest into a funeral pyre. The woman with the crossbow, still unnamed after all this chaos, looked at Eloan with exhausted eyes. Don't even consider it. She's bluffing, Eloan said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She burned 17 villages. I don't think she bluffs. The refugees had stopped crossing, paralyzed by fear and impossible choice. A child began to cry. Someone whispered a prayer to gods who seemed to have stopped listening months ago. And through the blood bond, Eloan felt Theron break free. Theron emerged from the passage like vengeance given form. His clothes were shredded. His skin marked with burns from the holy weapons, black blood staining him from a dozen wounds. But his eyes blazed with ancient fury, and in his hands he carried Celestria's severed chains, now dripping with her blood instead of his. The Archmagus is indisposed, he said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 centuries. Temporarily. She's more powerful than I anticipated, but arrogance is a reliable weakness. He moved to the refugees with inhuman grace. Cross. Now, I'll hold the passage. You're hurt, Eloan said, seeing the extent of his injuries now that he was closer. One arm hung wrong, clearly broken. His chest bore a wound that should have been fatal, still slowly knitting back together. I'm 200 years old. I've been hurt worse. He turned to face the passage entrance. What I am is angry. They destroyed my home, threatened people under my protection, made me break 2 centuries of carefully maintained peace. His fangs extended fully. They're going to regret that profoundly. The refugees scrambled across the stepping stones, the woman with the crossbow helping the children, everyone moving with desperate haste. Eloan stood beside Theron, refusing to abandon him again. I told you to go with them, he said without looking at her. You also said getting involved in human wars is how vampires die. We're both breaking rules tonight. Despite everything, he smiled. You're infuriatingly stubborn. I learned from the best. Soldiers poured from the passage, 15 of them, with the armored commander in the lead. But no Celestria. Theron had clearly hurt her badly enough to slow her pursuit. Last chance, the commander called. Surrender and face judgment. Resist and face annihilation. I choose option 3, Theron replied. I make you regret everything that led to this moment. He moved, not with the controlled precision of their training sessions, but with the unleashed savagery of something that had conquered kingdoms before deciding conquest was boring. He tore through the first rank of soldiers like paper, his enhanced strength turning holy armor into useless decoration. Eloan joined him, her newer instincts less refined but just as deadly. Together they were a storm. Theron's experience combined with Eloan's desperate fury, creating something greater than either alone. But the commander was different. His sword blazed brighter as he chanted prayers, and when he swung, the weapon moved with unnatural speed. He caught Theron across the chest, the holy fire searing deep. Theron staggered. The wound smoked, burning in ways normal injuries didn't. Consecrated steel, the commander said, blessed by 12 high priests over 12 months, specifically designed to kill things like you. He advanced. You're ancient, powerful, and utterly doomed. Eloan threw herself between them. The sword came down, and she caught it on her forearm, screaming as holy fire bit into her flesh. But she held it, just long enough for Theron to recover, to move, to rip the blade from the commander's grip and drive it through his chest. The commander fell, his eyes wide with shock that he could be killed by his own weapon. The refugees, Theron gasped. His wounds severe enough now that even his ancient healing struggled. Are they across? Eloan looked. The last of them were scrambling through the exit gap, moonlight swallowing them into the forest beyond. They're safe. Good. Theron's legs buckled. Eloan caught him, surprised by how heavy he felt, as if his immortality was suddenly subject to gravity's full weight. Listen carefully. Celestria will recover. When she does, she'll track you through that marking she mentioned. You need to find someone who can remove it. Who? There's a witch. Nadia Blackroot lives 3 days north, in the Whispering Marshes. She's old, older than me, maybe. Powerful. She can break blood magic. His breathing was labored, each word an effort. Take the refugees there. She'll help, but her prices are steep. Pay whatever she asks. I'm not leaving you here to die. I'm not going to die. I'm going to heal very slowly, and then I'm going to tear the Radiant Suns organization apart piece by piece until Celestria and I have a final conversation about boundaries. His smile was all teeth and promise. But that's going to take time. Time you don't have. Those people need you now. Through their blood bond, Eloan could feel the truth of his injuries. The consecrated steel had done damage that would take weeks to fully heal, maybe months. He would survive, but he was vulnerable in ways he hadn't been in centuries. Theron, go. That's not a request from your sire. That's a plea from someone who just discovered he still cares whether people live or die. His hand found hers, squeezed with what strength remained. You asked if I've lived these past 2 centuries. The answer was no. But tonight, fighting beside you, protecting those refugees, tonight I lived. Don't let that be wasted. Celestria's voice echoed through the cavern. Closer now, regaining strength. I'm coming, vampires. And this time I'm not taking prisoners. Eloan looked at the passage exit, at Theron's broken form, at the impossible choice before her. Then she made it. She kissed his forehead, a gesture that surprised them both, and ran. Behind her, she heard Theron rise one more time, heard him meet Celestria's renewed assault with defiant fury, buying seconds that turned into minutes that turned into escape. She reached the refugees at the forest's edge. They looked at her with fear and hope in equal measure. North, she said. 3 days. And we don't stop until we reach the marshes. The Whispering Marshes earned their name. As Eloan led the refugees deeper into the wetlands on the 3rd day, she heard voices, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, murmuring just below the threshold of comprehension. The woman with the crossbow, who'd finally introduced herself as Mira, pressed close to Eloan's side. Is this place haunted? Mira whispered. Worse, Eloan replied, remembering fragments from Theron's library. It's alive. The marsh itself is conscious or something close to it. Ancient magic soaked into the land so deep it developed awareness. The 12 refugees looked worse than when they'd fled Theron's sanctuary. 3 days of minimal rest, rationed food, and constant fear had hollowed them. The child Myra's husband had carried, a girl named Senna, had developed a fever that no amount of cool water could break. The teenage boy who'd been blood-marked had survived the magic's removal when Celestria's spell collapsed with distance. But he remained weak, trembling. And through the bond, Eloan felt Theron's pain like a constant ache. He was alive but diminished, hiding somewhere in the deep forest, healing with agonizing slowness. Twice she'd felt Celestria's magic searching for him, probing, hunting. So far, he'd evaded her. But it was only a matter of time. There, Eloan pointed to a structure rising from the marsh, not quite a house, more like a collection of wooden platforms and walkways connected by rope bridges, all draped in moss and living vines that glowed faintly in the twilight. Nadia Blackroot's home. They approached cautiously, feet squelching in mud that tried to hold them with each step. As they reached the first platform, a woman materialized from the shadows, ancient beyond reckoning. Her face a map of wrinkles that somehow made her more beautiful rather than less. Her eyes were the color of deep water, and they saw everything. A vampire barely 8 days old leading refugees marked by blood magic, Nadia said, her voice like whined through dead leaves. The world has become interesting again. Do come in. But leave the weapons, my home has rules about violence. Mira hesitated, then set down her crossbow. The others followed Eloan across the bridge into Nadia's dwelling, which defied physics in subtle ways. Rooms were larger inside than outside. Hallways led to impossible spaces. Time felt negotiable. The Archmagus Celestria's work, Nadia said, examining each refugee with eyes that seemed to see through flesh to the magic beneath. Tracking spells, blood markers, resonance hooks designed to lead hunters straight to you. Nasty business. She's gotten more sophisticated since I last encountered her work. Can you remove them? Aloan asked. Oh, certainly. For a price. Nadia gestured them to sit around a table that hadn't existed moments before. Let's discuss terms. Removing Celestria's magic from 12 people is extensive work. It will cost you 3 favors. To be called upon at times of my choosing. No refusal, no negotiation. 3 favors could mean anything, Mira protested. You could ask us to murder someone, to betray our families. I could, but I won't. I'm old, child. Old enough to find mortal evils tedious. Nadia poured tea from a pot that steamed with vapors that changed color moment to moment. My favors tend toward the inconvenient rather than the evil. Fetching rare ingredients. Delivering messages to dangerous places. Witnessing events I need observed. Nothing that will damn your soul, but everything that will inconvenience your life. We accept, Aloan said. You speak for them? Nadia's eyebrow rose. I speak for myself. The first favor is mine. If the others choose to accept, that's their decision. Mira looked at the exhausted refugees, at Senna burning with fever, at the boy still trembling from blood magic's aftereffects. We accept. All of us. Excellent. Nadia's smile revealed teeth that were just slightly too sharp. This will hurt. Pain is part of the magic. You can't remove a tracking spell without the body rejecting it violently. But you'll survive. Probably. The ritual took hours. Nadia worked with materials that shouldn't exist, powders made from dried starlight, water that flowed upward, words and languages that predated human speech. Each refugee screamed as the blood magic was torn from their flesh, leaving them gasping and hollow but clean. When it finished, dawn was approaching. Aloan felt its pressure against her new vampire nature. Not deadly yet, but uncomfortable, a warning. You'll want to rest, Nadia said. But there's something you should know before you sleep. Celestria didn't just mark your refugees. She marked you, child, through your connection to your sire. Aloan's blood went cold. What? When Theron fought her, she tasted his essence. And through him she can taste you. Every vampire is connected to their sire through blood. She's using that connection as a bridge. Nadia's expression was grave, which means wherever you go, you lead her straight to Theron. And wherever he hides, she can follow the bond to find you. That's impossible. Sire bonds can't be tracked. They can by someone of Celestria's skill. She spent 3 years studying Theron specifically, learning his blood signature, his magical resonance. Nadia moved to a cabinet filled with bottles of impossible colors. There's only one way to break her tracking permanently. How? Sever the bond between you and your sire. Nadia pulled out a vial of liquid that seemed to contain midnight itself. It's not death. You'll both survive. But you'll never feel each other again. Never share strength or pain. Never find each other through that supernatural connection. You'll be as strangers, magically speaking. No. The word burst from Aloan before thought caught up. There has to be another way. There isn't. Celestria has turned your bond into a weapon. Every moment you stay connected, you endanger him. Every moment he remains connected to you, he endangers you and everyone you're trying to protect. Nadia set the vial on the table between them. The question is, do you care about him enough to let him go? Through the bond, Aloan felt Theron, distant, wounded, determinately healing. She felt his stubborn will to survive, his growing hope that maybe immortality could be meaningful after all. His fierce protective instinct toward her despite having known her barely a week. She felt everything they'd just started to become to each other. If I sever the bond, Aloan asked quietly, will he know? Will he understand why? He'll feel it break. Whether he understands. Nadia shrugged. That depends on how well he knows you. Mira placed a hand on Aloan's shoulder. You saved us. Let us help you find another way. There is no other way. Aloan picked up the vial, her hands steady despite the devastation ripping through her. Theron taught me that survival sometimes requires sacrifice, that the right choice is rarely the easy one. She met Nadia's ancient gaze. What do I do? Drink. The bond will sever instantly. It will feel like dying. In some ways, it is. You're killing a part of yourself. Eloan uncorked the vial. The liquid inside smelled like endings, like the last breath before death, like every goodbye ever spoken. She drank. The world shattered. The absence was worse than any physical pain Eloan had endured. Where Theron's presence had been, constant, warm, reassuring, now gaped a void. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, her newly immortal body rejecting the severance like a wound that couldn't heal. For 3 days she'd carried him with her, felt his heartbeat synchronized with hers, known she wasn't alone in this monstrous transformation. Now she was utterly, completely alone. It's done, Nadia said quietly. Celestria can no longer track you through him, nor him through you. You're free of each other. Free felt like the cruelest word in any language. Mira helped Eloan to a bed in one of Nadia's impossible rooms. The refugees whispered among themselves, their fear of her vampire nature temporarily overcome by witnessing her obvious suffering. Even Senna, fever finally broken, brought Eloan water with small, solemn hands. Will she be all right? The child asked Nadia. Physically? Yes. Emotionally? The witch shrugged. That remains to be seen. Severing a sire bond isn't natural. It's amputation of something that should be permanent. She'll survive, but she'll never be quite whole again. Eloan wanted to argue, to say she was fine, that this was necessary and therefore bearable. But the lie wouldn't come. She curled into herself and let the grief wash over her in waves. She woke hours later to find Nadia sitting beside her bed, watching with those ancient, knowing eyes. He felt it, didn't he? Eloan's voice was raw. Theron. He felt the bond break. Undoubtedly, it would have hit him like a physical blow. Nadia handed her a cup of something that steamed with herbal comfort. He's probably thinking you're dead, that Celestria found you and killed you. The severed bond would feel identical to death. Good. Eloan sat up slowly. Let him think that. Let him mourn and move on. He'll be safer believing I'm gone. Will he? Or will he rage against your death with the fury of someone who just rediscovered what it means to care? Nadia's smile was sad. You don't know him as well as you think, child. Theron the tyrant may have walked away from his kingdom, but he's never walked away from a fight. Especially not one that costs him something precious. Then what do I do? You continue forward. You protect these people who've placed their trust in you. You grow into the vampire you're meant to become. Not Theron's creation, but your own being with your own purpose. Nadia stood, moving to the window where moonlight painted the marshes silver. The first favor I'll call upon. There's a settlement 3 days east. New Haven, they call it. A place where refugees from the Radiant Sun's purges have gathered. They need someone with your particular skills. I'm barely 9 days old. What skills could I possibly? You survived a mass grave. Transformation. Battle. Severance of your sire bond. You've done more in 9 days than most vampires accomplish in decades. Nadia turned back to her. New Haven needs a protector. Someone strong enough to defend them, young enough to remember what it means to be human, stubborn enough to refuse to let innocence die. You're perfectly qualified. I don't know how to protect an entire settlement. You'll learn, just as you learn to hunt without killing. Just as you learn to fight beside your sire against impossible odds. Nadia's expression softened slightly. You're not alone in this, Eloan. The refugees you saved, they've chosen to follow you. Mira has been organizing them while you slept. They want to help build something at New Haven. Something better than what the Radiant Sun destroyed. Eloan looked out the window at the marsh, at the whispering darkness that held secrets older than kingdoms. Somewhere out there, Theron was healing, probably believing her dead, possibly planning something catastrophically stupid like attacking Celestria directly to avenge her. She couldn't feel him anymore, couldn't send him reassurance through the bond, couldn't tell him she was alive and that the severance had been necessary, not desired. But she could honor what he'd taught her. She could protect people. She could make her immortality mean something. When do we leave for New Haven? she asked. Tomorrow night. But first, you need to feed properly. You've been surviving on minimal blood since your transformation. If you're going to protect an entire settlement, you need to be at full strength. Nadia produced another vial, this one filled with blood so rich and dark it seemed to pull at Aloan's hunger even through glass. This is from an ancient stag that lives deep in the marsh. Willing gift, freely given. It will strengthen you in ways normal feeding can't. Aloan drank and felt power flood through her. Not just physical strength, but clarity, purpose. The grief over losing Theron's presence didn't fade, but it became bearable, incorporated into who she was becoming. In the next room, she could hear the refugees, her refugees now, talking quietly among themselves, planning, hoping, trusting her to lead them to safety. She wouldn't fail them. The next evening, Aloan stood at the marsh's edge with 12 refugees, ready to begin the journey to New Haven. Nadia had provided supplies, protective charms against Celestria's magic, and a map marked with safe routes. One more thing, the witch said, pressing a small mirror into Aloan's hand. This will let you see your sire, though he won't see you. Once. Only once. Use it when you need to know he's alive, but use it wisely. The temptation to look will be constant. Aloan tucked the mirror away carefully. Thank you for everything. Thank me by surviving, by making your immortality matter. Nadia's ancient eyes gleamed. And when I call upon your second favor, come quickly. I don't ask lightly. They left as the moon rose, 13 figures moving through darkness toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the whispering marshes fell silent, as if the land itself was holding its breath to see what would happen next. 3 days later, they reached New Haven. It was larger than Aloan expected. Nearly 200 refugees clustered in a valley protected by natural rock formations, hidden from casual observation but vulnerable to any determined assault. They'd built rough shelters, established a communal kitchen, created the skeleton of civilization from nothing. But they had no walls, no defenses, no way to stop the radiant sun if, when they were discovered. The settlement's unofficial leader, an older man named Corvus, met them at the valley entrance. His eyes widened when he saw what Aloan was. A vampire, he breathed. Nadia sent us a vampire? She sent you a protector, Mira corrected sharply, stepping forward. This is Aloan. She saved us from the radiant sun, led us through 3 days of pursuit. She's the reason we're alive. Corvus studied Aloan with the careful assessment of someone who'd survived by reading people accurately. Can you fight? Yes. Can you kill? If necessary. Can you teach others to do the same? Because we can't rely on one vampire to save us. We need to learn to save ourselves. Aloan thought of Theron, teaching her to hunt and fight and think strategically, sharing his knowledge not because he had to, but because he wanted her to survive. I can teach you, she said, but understand, I'm 9 days old as a vampire. I'm learning as I go. What I can offer is determination, enhanced strength, and a promise. I won't let this settlement fall without a fight. Corvus extended his hand. Then welcome to New Haven, Protector. We have a lot of work to do. As Aloan shook his hand, she felt the weight of 200 lives settle onto her shoulders. And somewhere, far away, through a bond that no longer existed, she hoped Theron would understand why she'd chosen to carry this weight alone. 6 weeks passed before the radiant sun found them. In that time, Aloan had transformed New Haven from a collection of frightened refugees into something resembling a defensible community. She taught 30 volunteers to fight, not with the grace of centuries-old warriors, but with the desperate efficiency of people who refused to be victims again. She'd established patrol routes, built watchtowers from scavenged wood, and created an alarm system using bells salvaged from destroyed churches. But when Celestria's army appeared on the valley ridge at sunset, Aloan knew it wasn't enough. 300 soldiers, 24 blood mages, and at their center, the Archmagus herself, riding a horse as white as bone, her crimson robes snapping in wind that didn't touch anything else. Aloan the fledgling. Celestria's voice carried across the valley, amplified by magic. The vampire who survived a mass grave, who severed her sire bond to protect refugees. How admirably noble, how completely futile. Aloan stood at the valley entrance, her 30 trained fighters behind her, 200 civilians evacuating through the back canyon as planned. Mira was with them, carrying Senna, making sure everyone reached the emergency tunnels Aloan had insisted they dig. "You don't have to do this," Aloan called back. "These people aren't your enemy. They're farmers, bakers, families. They just want to live. They consort with vampires. That makes them heretics. And heresy, like cancer, must be cut out completely." Celestria raised her hand, and the blood mages began their chanting. "I'll give you one chance, surrender yourself, and I'll make your death quick. Your people will be given the choice to convert or die cleanly. Refuse, and I'll make an example of this entire settlement that will be remembered for generations." Through the mirror Nadia had given her, which Aloan had looked through only once, confirming Theron was alive and hunting Celestria's forces in distant territories, she'd learned that the Radiant Sun feared nothing more than martyrs. Public executions were meant to break spirits, not inspire resistance. "I have a counteroffer," Aloan said. "Single combat. You and me. If I win, you and your army leave and never return. If you win, I surrender, and New Haven converts to your faith without resistance." Celestria laughed. "You're 9 weeks old. I've mastered blood magic for 30 years. What possible reason would I have to accept such absurd terms?" "Because you're afraid." Aloan took a step forward. "Afraid that if you slaughter another settlement, more refugees will flee to places you can't reach. That resistance will spread. That your holy war will become the very thing that unites people against you. But if you defeat me in honest combat, you prove your cause is righteous. That your magic is superior. That the Radiant Sun truly has divine favor." The challenge hung in the air. Aloan could see Celestria calculating, weighing options, recognizing the trap even as she felt compelled by pride to accept it. "Very well," the Archmagus said finally. "Single combat. But when you lose, and you will lose, your people will witness your failure before they bend the knee." They met in the center of the valley as the sun finished setting, giving Aloan the full strength of night. Celestria dismounted gracefully, her hands already weaving preparatory spells that made the air shimmer with lethal potential. "Your sire was stronger than you," Celestria said conversationally. "And I nearly killed him. You're an infant by comparison. This will be over in moments. Then let's not waste time talking." Aloan moved. 6 weeks of constant training, hunting, pushing her vampire abilities to their limits had taught her things Theron's brief instruction couldn't. She was young, yes, but youth meant speed, adaptability, the desperate creativity of someone with everything to lose. Celestria's first spell would have incinerated a normal vampire. But Aloan had learned to sense magic building, to dodge before it fully formed. She closed the distance, forcing the mage into close quarters where elaborate spells became liabilities. They fought with brutal intensity. Celestria's blood magic tore at Aloan's flesh, burning and cutting and trying to dominate her will. But Aloan had survived a mass grave by refusing to surrender, had endured transformation, bond severance, and 6 weeks of carrying an entire settlement's hope on her shoulders. She'd learned that survival wasn't about strength. It was about stubbornness. Celestria realized her mistake too late. She'd expected a fledgling, weak, and inexperienced. Instead, she faced something that had been forged in fire and loss, tempered by responsibility and impossible choices. Aloan's hand closed around Celestria's throat. Not to kill, that would make her a martyr, but to dominate, to prove superiority through the same violence the Radiant Sun had used to justify their crusade. "Yield," Aloan commanded. Celestria's eyes blazed with hatred and disbelief. "Never. Yield, or I demonstrate exactly what monsters are capable of when you push them too far." Aloan's fangs extended fully. "Your soldiers are watching. Your mages are watching. Yield and live to fight another day. Or die here and prove that divine favor is just a story you tell yourselves." The silence stretched. Then, barely audible, Celestria whispered, I yield. Eloan released her, stepping back. Honor our agreement. Leave. Don't return. Celestria stood, humiliation burning in every line of her body. She turned to her army. We leave. This settlement is under protection. As 300 soldiers began their retreat, a figure emerged from the tree line behind them. Tall, dark-haired, moving with predatory grace that made even the Radiant Sun's warriors step aside instinctively. Theron. He looked different, fully healed but harder somehow. His eyes found Eloan across the valley, and in them she saw 6 weeks of believing her dead, of hunting Celestria's forces with single-minded vengeance, of mourning something he'd just barely allowed himself to care about. You, he said simply. You're alive. I severed the bond to save you, Eloan replied. To stop Celestria from using our connection as a weapon. I know. Nadia told me when I threatened to burn her marsh to the ground looking for answers. He crossed the valley slowly, deliberately. I've spent 6 weeks dismantling Celestria's supply lines, freeing her captives, destroying her bases of operation. All because I thought she'd killed you. I'm sorry. Don't. He stopped in front of her. You made the right choice. The strategic choice. The choice I should have made if I were thinking clearly. His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek. But strategies and right choices don't make loss hurt less. Celestria, watching this reunion, smiled coldly. How touching. The tyrant and his severed progeny, reunited by violence. You deserve each other. We probably do, Theron agreed. Then to Eloan. She's leaving. But she'll be back. The Radiant Sun doesn't forgive defeats. I know. Which is why New Haven needs more than just me. Eloan looked at him steadily. It needs someone who's survived 200 years. Who knows how to build defenses that last. Who can teach me everything I still need to learn. You want me to stay? Here? Protecting refugees. He glanced around the valley, at the rough shelters and determined faces of people who'd refused to surrender to fear. I walked away from a kingdom because I was tired of responsibility. This isn't a kingdom, it's a community, and I'm not asking you to rule. I'm asking you to help. She stepped closer. The bond is severed. We're not sire and progeny anymore, not in the magical sense. But we could be partners, equals, building something that matters. Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked toward the valley entrance where Mira and the others were emerging from the evacuation tunnels. Relief and hope dawning on their faces as they saw their protector victorious. Partners, he said finally. I like the sound of that. New Haven grew. 3 months after Celestria's defeat, the settlement had tripled in size. Word spread through the refugee networks, whispered in hidden camps, passed along forest trails, carried by desperate people who had heard of a place where a vampire and her partner protected those the Radiant Sun had marked for death. Eloan stood on the new stone wall, built under Theron's meticulous direction, watching the sun set over a valley that had been transformed. Proper houses now stood where tents had once huddled. Gardens produced food. A school taught children who had lost everything that knowledge was power. A forge crafted weapons and tools. A hospital run by healers from a dozen destroyed towns tended to the sick and wounded. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was real. It was chosen. It was proof that survival could become something more than mere existence. You're brooding again, Theron said, materializing beside her with the silence of 2 centuries of practice. You brood more than I do, and I've had 200 years to perfect it. I'm thinking, Eloan corrected. There's a difference. Not much of one. He leaned against the wall, comfortable in the companionable silence they had developed. The bond was gone, but they had built something else, something based on choice rather than magical compulsion. Partnership, friendship, perhaps something more, though neither had named it yet. Myra's organizing another rescue mission, Eloan said. 2 villages east of here. The Radiant Sun is moving through systematically. She thinks we can extract at least 50 people before the soldiers arrive. It's dangerous, Celestria has learned from her defeat. She's adapting her tactics. I know, but we're adapting too. Eloan glanced at him. You taught me that. Survival requires evolution. I taught you that? He smiled. I seem to remember you teaching me quite a bit. About purpose. About why immortality without meaning is just extended suicide. About feelings? Eloan interrupted gently. About letting yourself care again? His smile faded into something more serious. Yes, about that. He was quiet for a moment. I received word from the southern kingdoms. 3 of the remaining vampire houses want to meet. They've heard about New Haven, about what we're building. They're interested in the concept. Interested in helping or interested in controlling? Both, probably. Old vampires don't change easily. But the fact that they're willing to talk suggests something is shifting. The Radiant Sun's crusade has pushed too far. Even vampires who have spent centuries in isolation are starting to realize that hiding isn't the same as surviving. Eloan thought about the mass grave where she had been left to die. About Theron digging her out with his bare hands because he had heard one impossible heartbeat. About the choice she had made to transform, to fight, to sever her bond, to build instead of simply surviving. Tell them we'll meet, she said. But on our terms. Here in New Haven. If they want to be part of this, they need to see what we've actually built. Not politics or power games. Just people trying to create something better. You know they'll try to manipulate you. To use your youth and idealism against you. Let them try. I survived a mass grave. I think I can handle some ancient vampires with superiority complexes. Theron laughed, a sound that had become more frequent in recent months. You really are insufferably stubborn. I learned from the best. Below them, the evening meal was being served in the communal hall. Voices rose in conversation and occasional laughter. Senna played with other children in the square, her fever a distant memory. The teenage boy who had been blood-marked now helped Corvus with defensive planning. His trauma transformed into determination. And somewhere in the Eastern Territories, Eloan's brothers, Pip and Carrick, lived under the protection of allies Nadia had connected them with. Safe. Federal growing up in a world slightly less cruel than the one that had stolen their sister. Eloan had sent them a letter, carefully worded, explaining she was alive but changed, that she could not return but would always watch over them. Pip had written back, his handwriting careful and proud. We understand. We're learning to be brave like you. Maybe someday we'll meet again. Maybe someday. Eloan had eternity to hope for that reunion. The second favor, Eloan said suddenly. Nadia called it in yesterday. She wants me to retrieve something from the ruins of the old capital. Something she says will change the nature of the conflict with the Radiant Sun. She's dramatic. Comes with the territory of being a 1,000-year-old witch. Theron's expression turned calculating. The old capital is heavily fortified. Celestria has made it her base of operations since we disrupted her mobile forces. I know, which is why I'm not going alone. Eloan looked at him directly. Partners, remember? Equals building something that matters. You want to walk into Celestria's stronghold, retrieve a mysterious object for a cryptic witch, and somehow survive to tell the tale? Yes, exactly that. Theron shook his head, but he was smiling. 200 years of careful survival instincts, completely obliterated by one stubborn fledgling who refuses to accept reasonable limitations. Is that a yes? It's a when do we leave? 3 days. That gives us time to prepare and brief Mira on managing New Haven in our absence. 3 days, Theron agreed. Then, more quietly, Eloan. Yes. Thank you for digging me out of my own grave. The metaphorical one I'd been buried in for 2 centuries. His hand found hers. I thought walking away from my kingdom meant I had escaped the weight of caring. But you showed me that caring isn't weight. It's wings. The only thing strong enough to make immortality feel like flight instead of falling. Eloan squeezed his hand, feeling the cool strength in his grip that mirrored her own. You dug me out first. Literally. With your bare hands. From a mass grave where I should have died. You gave me a choice when everyone else had stolen mine. Everything that came after, every person we've saved, every life we've protected, it started with that choice. Then we're even. No, Eloan smiled. We're partners. That's better than even. As night fully claimed the valley, New Haven's lights blazed against the darkness, not in defiance, but in declaration. Here, in this hidden valley, people had chosen to build instead of surrender, to fight instead of flee, to transform tragedy into purpose. Watching over them stood two vampires. One ancient, relearning what it meant to live. One newly reborn, discovering that immortality could be a gift instead of a curse. The radiant sun would return. Celestria would seek revenge. The world beyond New Haven remained dangerous, unpredictable, and often cruel. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. There was hope. There was proof that even those left for dead could rise again. Not as victims, but as something stronger. As protectors. As partners. As living proof that transformation, however painful, is sometimes the only path to becoming who you were always meant to be.